Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Mindock. I teach double reeds at the University of South Alabama, and I'm going to give you some comments and tips to help you prepare the high school lyrical bassoon etude for this year's Alabama All-State Band auditions. So this etude doesn't come from the 50 etudes in the back of the Weizenbohren like we usually use. It comes from the method book part in the front, but it still manages to be a pretty complete and dramatic little etude despite its context. It's in a beautiful key, right? The key signature itself doesn't look too bad. It's just 3 sharps, though if you spend all your time in band playing flat keys, 3 sharps might freak you out a little bit. But what makes it extra fun is that it's the minor key. It's not the major key. And as you guys hopefully know, the minor scales have extra augmentations that happen to them, right? You get raised 6th and 7th scale degrees depending on which minor scale you're using. And when you already got a bunch of sharps in the key signature, that can bring about things like B sharps and E sharps and F double sharps. Woo, rude. So there's a lot of stuff in here that will hurt your eyes, I think, as you're playing through it. The good news is that it all makes a lot of melodic sense. So if it sounds wrong, it probably is. So you can kind of use your ear to guide you to make sure you're playing everything right. And the other thing is that it is a lot of patterns. So while I know you guys probably don't spend a lot of your time playing F sharp minor scales and the associated diminished arpeggios and things that tend to go with them, those patterns are in here. So once you spend some time breaking this apart and getting used to some of these arpeggios and scales, you can start to depend on those patterns because they do repeat themselves. Like these particularly gnarly looking arpeggios are just the same arpeggios all the way through. So once you get the notes that comprise them in your hands, you just repeat those notes through the octaves and don't let your eyes freak you out and make you play something you shouldn't. Just trust the patterns, trust the patterns. The other thing that's tough about F sharp minor is that it requires you to play a lot of C sharps and F sharps. And the very first few notes of this etude, the core of this harmony, are some of the least stable notes on the bassoon. So that's fun. So I want to give you guys some alternate fingerings for those that will provide the stability in our lives that we all so desperately need these days. So that's C sharp, the very first note of the etude, is I think the worst note on my bassoon if you play it the way that it's typically fingered in a fingering chart. It's not usually as bad on most student bassoons I encounter as it is on mine, but I'll give you this extreme example. So I'm just fingering it 1, 2, 3, C sharp, and then the D bar on the back, and this is what I get. That's terrible, right? I mean, I can't depend on that. It keeps changing pitch on me just from slight changes in air pressure. So I wouldn't be able to do different dynamics. I wouldn't be able to do anything with it and know that it's going to play the right thing. So I use the long C sharp fingering. So same on the top. So just the C sharp thumb that's right above the whisper key, and 1, 2, 3. And then I add on my right hand 2, 3, 4. Like I'm going to play low F, but without my first finger, okay? Adding those 3 fingers adds a ton of stability to that note for me. So I'm going to play it with just the left hand first, and then you're going to hear me add the right hand. Oh, hello. Suddenly that's much more robust and round and resonant, and I can trust it. So here it is quiet. Here it is loud. Oh, isn't that better? Oh God, so great. So it may be a little tricky to learn to use your right hand with it. It's worth it. Trust me, it really, really is. So use that one. That way you can play all this incredible dynamic shading that exists in this very expressive etude. Second note of the piece, the F sharp, same problem, right? The standard fingering that's in fingering charts for this of 2, 3, resonance key 1 tends to be sharp and not super resonant. So I add my second finger and my thumb B flat on my right hand to that fingering, and it creates a lot more stability and dependability. So here it is, just the 2, 3, 1, and then I'll add the 2 on the right hand and the B flat. Whoa, that's a tremendous difference. So those first couple notes, if I use those long fingerings, are so much more stable and dependable. And that's what I want if I want to be extra dramatic with this etude. If I really want to start piano and dolce in this super delicate way, but then when I start to fill everything up with these hairpins and these fortes that show up, I can really, really create a sense of contrast and make this extra dynamic, extra dramatic. And it's a really fun etude to play that way. So I hope you all can unlock that musical sense inside yourself and just go for it with all of these dynamics that are here. I mean, the range of that first line is huge. So even though it only says piano for the dynamic, I mean, that begs for drama. That's a lot. They'll go from high A all the way down to D sharp in one phrase. So there's a crescendo there. Use it. Oh man. Rattle some windows. Get those low notes cranking, okay? Other things that'll help the smoothness and the reliability of this would be when you get to flick notes, like A, B, B flat, C in that register. Those, if you're using the flick keys to help you make sure those come out in the right place and you can voice them appropriately, they'll be much more stable. If when I just said that, you were like, flick notes, flicking, what are you talking about? Or if you were like, I've heard that before and I don't know what it is. Or, oh, I've heard of that and I hate it and I'm never doing it because it's the hardest thing ever. My advice for you is that you actually go and watch the middle school bassoon lyrical etude that I recorded this year, because that etude is surprisingly high for a middle school etude. And so I actually decided to spend some time talking about how to learn to flick. And I have a thumb cam in there to give you some basic exercises and talk about why we do it and why it's important and how to work it into your life. So if you need those things, go watch the middle school lyrical etude video. I'm not going to repeat them all here. They're right there. You can go watch that one, okay? But that will help a lot. And there's a lot of places in this etude where you need to slur to that register, and you want to be able to trust it. You don't want to have to bite it and do weird things to make it come out, and you want to be able to have a fully resonant, beautiful sound. The other thing that I'm not going to go into here, but would be happy to go into with you individually, that you'll need to play this etude at its most dramatically epicness, would be vibrato. So if you're not comfortable with vibrato, or you don't know how to do it, or you are just not really sure how to approach adding it to your life, it is something that I try to specialize in helping people learn how to do vibrato and giving some exercises to teach it, because I find it to be something a lot of teachers avoid because it's just kind of hard to talk about and hard to explain. So I've made it a point to not avoid it. Even though I know, ironically, I'm not going to get into it here because it just will take longer than I think we should have for this video. So if you would like to spend that time talking about vibrato with me, shoot me an email. And I'll probably give you some text-based stuff to start with. And then if you would like to have a Zoom meeting to continue to do it more, to actually play together, I'd be happy to do that, because it's a really important thing for us, and especially for this etude, man. Oh, you need it. It's just so much more fun when you can get those notes vibrating. I also want to talk about the articulation right here, the dots under a slur. This articulation perplexes a lot of students because you think, well, I tongue staccatos and I don't tongue slurs. So what do I do with that? Because that's telling me two contrasting, conflicting things. This notation comes from string writing, and it makes a lot more sense to a violinist. So let me explain to you how they would do it, and then you can try to apply that to the bassoon. So if I was a violinist and I had just notes with no slurs, okay, I would change my bow direction for every note. So I would put my finger down and I would bow like that, right? Much more grace and form. And so every time I put my finger down and change my bow direction, the string will start vibrating, and then it stops when I change that bow direction. So it's very similar to the way we start and stop the air with our tongue, right? So it's how they articulate. If they have a slur, they just put their fingers down and move the bow all in that one same direction, so the string keeps vibrating and the notes are connected. If a violinist sees this, the slur means bow direction and the staccatos mean separation. So what they're going to do is, as they put their fingers down for each note, they're going to keep the bow moving in the same direction, but they're going to separate each individual note as they do it. And that creates a really interesting and unique sound where you get the string continuing to vibrate between the notes, so it's not getting that abrupt stop that you get from changing the bow direction, but you also get this little shape to each note because of the way that they, in order to separate them on the bow, they have to kind of pulse the bow a little bit and lift it at the end of each one. So you get what's actually pretty similar to how we tend to play staccato notes, where you tend to use a little bit extra air and then back off so that they taper to nothing really quickly. And I say that knowing we haven't talked about staccato notes in this piece. If you play your staccatos like this, tut, tut, ta, then I encourage you to think about ta, 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 almost like a Santa laugh, ha, 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 where you get that little burst of air and then end it with an H. It's a much more sophisticated way to play your staccato. So if you have that kind of shape, but you connect the notes together so that there's not actually silence between them, then that's the best way to approximate what a string instrument sounds like when it does that. And I think that's what most composers are looking for when they write this in their music, okay? So if you think about staccato Fs, this notation would be, right? So you can hear how they're the same shape, they're individual, but they're connected. So here, right? So you can hear the little individual shape of each note, which is particularly juicy as you get them slower and diminuendo them into this long fermata, followed by a fermata rest. Like, think how extra you can be with this. Do it. It's so fun. And then you'll have the same thing on the next line with these guys, right? Okay. Forte piano, same idea with the shape. Lots of air, kind of blossom the note. Just let it, and then come back down. And then you can go up for the crescendo up to the top of the arpeggio. You also have a rinforzando down here, which is a similar animal. So the different types of, you've seen sforzandos, I'm sure, SFs or SFZs. Rinforzandos are similar, but they have less pop in the tongue, and they often show up in places like this under a slur. So they're going to be the same kind of air as a sforzando, which is probably not that dissimilar to what I just did for the forte piano, but they just won't have an attack. So you give a little extra oomph in your air to that rinforzando note. Okay, so I think I've covered everything I want to talk about specifically. There's a lot more that we could talk about in this etude. So please feel free to send me an email with any questions you have. If you want to talk about vibrato, if you want to talk more about flicking, if you want to play stuff for me and set up a meeting, I'm happy to do that with you guys. Otherwise, in the meantime, happy practicing and good luck.